You know, one final element before we get to our next topic, Scott, a name that's come out, and there's been conflicting information as to where this might go, but it does seem as if Dean Skelos, the Senate Majority Leader, might be the next name here that's going to be in this ongoing investigation by the U.S. Attorney. We wondered where Bahara was going for this. And there was two different ways, right? He could either move vertical, horizontal, or he could go below and try and go for the volume, if you will, here. What does it tell you that, at least in order here, Dean Skelos might be the next one that's going to be answering some questions?
See, I think almost everyone is in that Moreland Commission report. And that's what the basis of this is. And they don't call you and say, by the way, you're a target of an investigation. So he's not going to get those kinds of telephone calls. The fact of the matter is that anybody who's in a leadership position, I think, was part of the Moreland Commission and therefore is probably being looked at.
And you're thinking, Dominic, they're going to get an indictment here without...
I think that if I'm Dean Skelos, I'm hiring counsel tonight, because in all likelihood, he's got the same Shelley problem, and in all likelihood will be arrested or indicted. The only question is when.
I'm waiting for Andrew Cuomo to step in and single-handedly take, I did this with my commission, cleaned up Albany single-handed. See what I did?
That would be very interesting, Andrew. No one would buy that, but that'd be a nice trick. All right. To our next issue. New York Times columnist Charles Blow, he is fuming, and it's not about an issue that he's covered in his paper, but this is much closer to home. It has to do with his son's run-in with the police at Yale University. Blow says his son, who is a third-year chem student, was leaving a library on campus when police at the Ivy League school approached him at gunpoint and asked him to get on the ground. Police say that they were searching for a burglary suspect and that he, quote, fit the description, end quote. He was wearing clothes, in fact, similar to the suspect. After Blow's son stated that he was a student and showed them his student ID, they let him go without further incident. Now, the columnist, the father, Mr. Blow, says that this is the scenario I have always dreaded. My son at the wrong end of a gun barrel, face down in the concrete. I had always dreaded the moment that we would share stories about encounters with the police in which our lives hung in the balance, intergenerational stories of joining the Inglorious Club. Now, while Blow is known for his editorials often dealing with race relations and American identity, he did not mention in his article that the officer who forced his son to the ground is in fact black. In fact, Mr. Blow went on CNN's Cooper Anderson show here, and he asked the question, Anderson Cooper show, excuse me, why that was left out.
When we have those conversations with our kids, we don't say, well, if you run into a white police officer, behave like this and this and this and this. And if you run into a black police officer, you don't have to worry about any of that. You'll do whatever you want to do, jam your hands into all your pockets and, jump around and talk back. We talk about the police in general. And I am very happy that when he turned around and saw whoever was with the gun, that he didn't behave any differently. He didn't see any difference. He saw a gun and an officer, and he followed the very same script.
All right, Dominic, do this first from a journalist standpoint. Should he have mentioned, does it matter the race of the officer? Especially given how often that Charles Blow has talked about the color of the skin of the white officer in Ferguson, Missouri versus,
First of all, Mr. Blow is not the only journalist to face this situation. I face the same thing with my son. It's not a comfortable position whenever it happens. And frankly, you question yourself, Richard, because you say, here it is, I'm on television every night, but my son, when he's not with daddy, and you've met my son, he's about my height, he has epilepsy, when he has on jeans, all the police see is a black kid. So in my son's case, and I'm coming right back to this point, my son, who's never been involved with the police, he had to go to the bathroom, and he was running at a shopping mall just to find a bathroom. Cops saw him running, didn't pull the gun, said, get on the ground, eagle. That was the one thing I swore that would never happen to my son. I had no control over it. So he should have pointed it out in the story, but it's irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, it does not matter if the cop is black, white, Asian, green, white, Latino. If he's ordering he or she is ordering, gender doesn't matter either. If they're ordering your child on the ground at gunpoint, it's not a good feeling.
And Blow's explanation was that this is more about the culture of policing than it is about the race of the police officer.
And it is.
And that's the point that he was making, and why he explained he didn't include the race of the officer
That
in the
doesn't
story.
carry water, though. To intimate that there was a racial issue and not describe what the police officer was is leaving off, in that case, a pretty important fact.
I agree with you.
If he were really talking about police force, then he would have put in to say all police, regardless of race, have a problem sometimes in how they
Well, I think
administer the law.
that is one of the points that he's making, and that's one of the reasons why he says he did not indicate the race of the police officer. That if it's a white cop, then there's a automatic assumption that there's a racism from the individual cop to his son or to any suspect. The fact that he didn't mention race at all, or that the officer was black, shows, at least in Blow's mind, that there's an institutional culture among police.
But Andrew, you know,
that treats
let's
black young
go
men
to
differently.
if we have, there was that shooting, I believe in December in New Jersey, where there was a stop, and at that traffic stop, 2 officers pulled up. One of the officers apparently recognized this was the incident, the passenger, and in the front seat. And apparently when he opened up the glove compartment, there was a gun there. There was a long exchange. Gunfire ended up coming out. The report was the guy had his hands up. But my point is, if the officer were white that opened fire on the gentleman who was also black, who had a criminal record, apparently a violent record, and everything else at the time, would we have reported the story differently? Would the reaction have been different? To say that it would have had no consequence, I think, is being disingenuous. With everything that happened, whether it be in Staten Island, everything that happened in Ferguson, everything that happened in South Carolina, and I can go through story after story, the race of the 2 people involved, right or wrong, matters now as how the story is told in terms of the reactions that will happen afterwards. And to suggest otherwise, I think we're kidding ourselves.
Let me try and end around this part of the. Is there anybody at the table who doesn't think that young people of color are treated differently by police? I mean, young people of color. Is there anybody who would disagree with that?
That's not the point. The
Well,
point is you could have made a better point by saying this was not a race issue. This is a police over-enforcement issue. If you're going to make that point, then describe the fact that this is a black-on-black situation. It eliminates the race per se, and it says this is a police mentality that has to change.
But if there's a general consensus that young people of color, young men of color, are treated differently by police, then it is a racial issue, and it's also a policing issue. I mean, it's both together. It's the, just because the officer is black or white or Latino or Asian, if the preponderance of police, or an awful lot of police, seem to be treating.
Maybe let me try it this way, Andrew. If I didn't know, I would have assumed reading that it was a white cop who put his kid face down on the pavement in New Haven, right? Now, whether that matters or not, that would have been my assumption from the way I read. It doesn't change the fact that you said, right, that a third-year chem student shouldn't have to be face down on the pavement here because he happened to look like somebody. And we don't even know the detail of it.
I'm not sure that I can buy in your sort of collective assumption. I'm very, very mindful of a disproportionate impact on young black men of policing interchanges. And I was on a panel this week in Yonkers about this issue. I think one little danger we have is we're sort of taking the New York City and the Fergusons and we're glomming them onto all police interchanges or interactions, and I think we ought to be careful about that. I think some departments are actually better than others
I'm sure
at avoiding the preponderance of overreaction by officers. I don't want to say accept what you said as a given.
Officers.
I know, I understood that, but I don't want to start with that as an automatic given. That being said, I think the other thing is black officers, from the ones I've talked to, including activist ones, are really struggling with this complicated role they have. And I suspect this officer, or I don't know it, I just think there's an added complication. I think from a journalistic...
New Haven's a rough area. Kids have been killed right around that campus. We don't know the details about the burglary. Was it an armed burglary? Was there ever else? He does seem, at least with the clothing that fit the description, I think he overreacted, but again, it's 11 o'clock. I think the cop did when he put him face down, but it's 11 o'clock at night when you don't know who you're approaching.
But Richard, see, that brings in the problem of black-on-black crime that we never like to talk about. We don't want to be honest about it. We don't want to be honest. I mean, there's a new rap thing out of the Bronx tonight with 2 prosecutors where they're talking about killing cops.
Yeah, we're going to do that. Offenders.
So I mean, it's outrageous, but at the same time, welcome to my world.
Yeah.
It does not matter if you went to Yale, you could have went to Harvard. It doesn't matter.
I might be getting you in trouble with this next topic here, so don't go anywhere. The Super Bowl, as we know, less than 48 hours away, and Seahawks cornerback Richard Sherman, he's got a big decision to make. It's not about a sponsorship or whatever else. The man likes to talk, but his girlfriend, Ashley Moss, she's expecting the couple's first child. She's due pretty soon, and while she's in Arizona with him for the Super Bowl, there is a question as to what happens if she goes into labor right on Super Bowl Sunday. Well, Seahawks coach Pete Carroll says it's about family first. We'll support any decision that Mr. Sherman makes. But Sherman himself said he may miss the game, and now he says he's not sure what he'll do. I'll go first, and hopefully my wife's not watching. I was there for the birth of all three of my children. It's the Super Bowl. I would like to think my wife would say, and even if it was the first one, this is the pinnacle of the pinnacle. The kid would have guilt trips for the rest of his life here if you didn't play in the game because you were there. I don't know. I think it's different than if it's just going to work one day. This is, okay, I'm going to stop talking so I might get in trouble. Would you kill your husband here if he was playing in the Super Bowl, he wasn't there for the delivery?
Honestly, I hate to be so technical, but if it's a first kid, you could be talking about 3 days in labor. And the guy could have played the Super Bowl twice by the time she really wanted him around. The rest of the time, she's like, get away from me. I don't want any men in this world. So I leave it in his hands. I mean, I liked having my husband around. He was nauseous. He was frightened. He was completely, not the world's most useful person, but I would have liked him being around.
This is an easy one for me, Richard. When my son was born, I was on a story on Deadline. My wife called me, Marilyn, and she said, I said, honey, I'm on Deadline. I'll get there when I can get there. And she said, quote, if you don't get your black, and I can't say the rest of it, to this hospital in the next 30 minutes, don't ever come home.
Okay.
So, but with that said.
And you got there.
Of course I got there. I went to less than 30 minutes. I went to the managing editor.
You weren't playing in the Super Bowl.
But Richard, come on. You got to give the Seahawks credit. Come on. Do you really believe their best defensive player is not going to play in the Super Bowl? Come on. I don't care how many times she's in the.
What if it's not just on Deadline for a story, but what if you have a one-on-one exclusive with the president? Would you get the same answer, or would you make the same decision?
I'm not the one to ask that question.
Yeah, okay.
Because I'm doing the interview with the president. I mean,
Scott?
and then I'll get home.
Look, Sherman's guilty of bad planning.
Fair point.
I was there for all of my children, but he just didn't plan this well.
That's a good line.
I'm trying to think of a Deflategate joke to bring in here, but it
yeah,
doesn't seem to
oh,
work.
God.
It doesn't seem to work.
How about you, Mr. Engaged Man?
I'm fine with whatever decision he makes. If he wants to be home and she wants him home, and that's fine, and I have no problem with him missing the game.
When did you become politic? You always, I'm fine with whatever decision.
No, I'm totally fine with whatever decision he would make. It's a
He's
football game.
He's already thinking ahead.
It's
You
a
can see it.
football
They
game.
would make. They would make. I like that.
Yes.
It's he and she together.
Thank you.
Richard, do you think he's going to miss the Super Bowl?
Hell no. Coming up next year, Mitt Romney says he is not throwing his hat into the race for the White House. Is this a good move for the GOP, and who could benefit from Romney's move? Don't forget also, phone lines open here. A mug's at stake. 888-766-2428. We got questions for you. If you got the right answers, big winner.